what we're talking about here. So, remember David's son Absalom, and you had Absalom's rebellion. The rebellion is quashed. Joab, the commander of the army, Absalom's hanging there by his hair, seems like. He sticks the arrows in his heart, kills Absalom. David is all sad. David is mourning. They get back, and Joab says to David, "Are you serious? You're sitting here crying over your rebellious son? And what do you think the army thinks? That the guys who were trying to kill them, you're sitting there shedding tears over those people? Come on, David. Get your head on straight and be a king. And you're demoralizing the troops by this attitude that you have." And so then in verse 8, so the king got up, took his seat in the gateway, and the men were told the king is sitting in the gateway. They all came before him. Let's pick it up there. I think that's a good place to start.
Where is that?
2 Samuel 19, beginning at verse, well, it's kind of like 8b, I guess. Israel had fled, or if you have the NIV 84, meanwhile, the Israelites had fled. So you kind of have this divided kingdom, kind of a little bit yet, and now we're going to try to bring everybody back together again under King David. So how about verse 8b through, it's a long section, 23. John's got that one. Tom, I'll get you next.
Israel had fled, every man to his own home. All the people in the tribes of Israel were quarreling, saying, "The king delivered us from the hand of our enemies. He saved us from the hand of the Philistines. Now he has fled out of the land from Absalom. But Absalom, whom we anointed over us, has died in battle. Now why are you silent, bringing back the king?" King David sent a message to Zadok and Abiathar the priests. He said, "Speak to the elders of Judah. Ask them, why will you be the last to bring the king back to his palace? The plan that all Israel has been discussing has been reported to the king at his house. You are my brothers, you are my flesh and blood. Why will you be the last to bring back the king?" He also said, "Say to Amasa, are you not my flesh and blood? May God punish me severely and double it, if you are not the permanent commander of my army in place of Joab." David turned the hearts of all men of Judah as if they were one man. They sent to the king and said, "Return, you and all your servants." So the king returned and came to the Jordan. The men of Judah came out to Gilgal and to meet the king and to bring the king across the Jordan. Shimei, son of Gera, the Benjaminite from Behurim, hurried and came down with the men of Judah to meet King David. 1,000 men from Benjamin were with him. Also Ziba, the manager of the house of Saul, came along with his 15 sons and 20 servants. They rushed down to the Jordan ahead of the king. They crossed over the ford to escort the household of the king across and make a good impression on the king. Shimei, son of Gera, bowed down before the king when he was crossing over the Jordan. He spoke to the king, "My lord, do not consider me guilty. Do not remember the wrong your servant did on the day that my lord the king went out from Jerusalem, and do not take it to heart. For I, your servant, know that I have sinned. Look, I have come today, the first one from the whole house of Joseph, to come down to welcome the Lord my lord the king." Abishai, son of Zeruiah, answered, "Shouldn't Shimei be put to death because he cursed the anointed of the Lord?" But David said, What do we have in common, you sons of Zeruiah? For today you are my adversaries. Should any man in Israel be put to death today? Do I not know that today I am king over Israel? The king said to Shimei, "You will not die." The king took an oath concerning him.
All right, let's just kind of pause there and get ourselves caught up on what's all going on here. On your sheets, number one is kind of what we talked about last time, how Joab took David aside and said, "You got to wake up, man. You're making everyone real sad here, and that's not going to be good for the army if they're feeling sad because of your attitude." So Joab's courage there. How about number two? Why do you think David was resolved to demote Joab? Remember, Amasa is who Absalom had made commander of his army. in Joab's place. So Amasa is David's nephew. Why do you think he was resolved to demote Joab and make Amasa general in his place? What do we know about David and Joab and some things Joab's done, Charlie?
I think part of it is to try to resolve or bring unity back to the country as a whole and bring them back into the fold. And like, if you look at what Lincoln did after the Civil War, take a very light approach with their adversaries, and let's
Unity, healing.
forgive and forget kind of a mentality.
Sure. I think that absolutely could be part of it. Anything else? If you want to look at it from the negative side, that's a positive way to look at it. I hope so. I hope that was the motive. What could maybe be a negative thing David was thinking about Joab?
Well, he killed, what's his name?
Absalom.
Absalom. Kind of not real stable then. You got this guy who doesn't do what he's supposed to. Can you trust him?
Right.
To be your head honcho.
Yeah, maybe a little, hate to say revenge, or a little, yeah, can I trust you? A little, you know what? Absalom was my beloved. I strictly told you not to harm Absalom, and you did it. You took it upon yourself. And again, we talked about Joe. He's a military guy. That's the way he thinks, and I'm sure he thought it was absolutely ridiculous that why would we save Absalom after everything he's done against us and everything he wants to do to you, King? He wants to kill you, and you want to save his life? So perhaps it was a little bit of that too, where, okay, well, now you're going to be demoted because of your actions. We're not really told, but we're going to find out real quickly that Joab's going to make himself head of the army again, regardless. So we'll see how long this lasts. Shimei, remember the story of Shimei? He was, if you go back to chapter 16, when David had fled Jerusalem because Absalom had taken over, and as he's going, we're told in 16 verse 5, as King David approached Bahurim, a man from the same clan as Saul's family came out from there. His name was Shimei, son of Gera, and he cursed as he came out. He pelted David and all the king's officials with stones, though all the troops in the special guard were on David's right and left. He said, get out, you man of blood, you scoundrel. The Lord has repaid you for all the blood you shed in the household of Saul, in whose place you've reigned. The Lord's handed the kingdom over to your son Absalom. You've come to ruin because you are a man of blood. And then Abishai said, how dare he talk to you that way? Let's cut off his head. Let's kill him. And David said, no, if the Lord wants it to happen, it'll happen. If not, not. So, fast forward to chapter 19. Shimei is on the wrong side of this, right? You got to think if you're Shimei, you're kind of going, Absalom lost and David won. So, of course, he's first in line to go out there and, oh, my king. I'm so sorry, my king. Please have mercy on me. I've sinned. And what was David's reaction?
All right then.
Yeah, kind of the same, kind of back to it. Okay, I don't want to.
What did he say?
He said, all right, yeah, you did, but Abishai, again, this guy should die for what he did. This guy should die for cursing you. And this is not the day for revenge. This is not the day to be shedding blood. We're trying to bring everyone back together again. Kind of a different side of David compared to what we saw like in way many chapters ago, kind of a bloodthirsty guy who is not afraid to go out and be cutting off heads and sticking swords through people. And you can almost see his spiritual maturity. You think of everything with Bathsheba and that whole story. He's turned down the violence a little bit, and you appreciate this side of David later on in his life. And he's going to talk later. He's getting old. I'm getting too old for this. He's going to go out to battle and almost get killed, and they say, you know what, David, you can't do this anymore. You're not as young as you used to be. So maybe part of that's just that spiritual maturity, and then the physical, I'm done fighting. I'm done with all the drama. Maybe some of you can relate to that. The older you get, the more you grow up, right? You grow up. Anything else in that section? All right, Tom. So back in before you get going, back in chapter 16 again, just as context, when David had gone a short distance beyond the summit, remember he's fleeing again from Jerusalem, there was Ziba, the steward of Mephibosheth, waiting to meet him. He had a string of donkeys saddled and loaded with 200 loaves of bread, 100 cakes of raisins, 100 cakes of figs, and a skin of wine. The king asked Ziba, "Why have you brought these?" And he answered, "The donkeys are for the king's household to ride on, the bread and fruit are for the men to eat, the wine is to refresh those who become exhausted in the desert." The king asked, "Where is your master's grandson?" Talking about Mephibosheth. Remember, that was Jonathan's son, Saul's grandson. Ziba said to him, "He's staying in Jerusalem because he thinks today the house of Israel will give me back my grandfather's kingdom." Then the king said to Ziba, "All that belonged to Mephibosheth is now yours." "I humbly bow," Ziba said. "May I find favor in your eyes, my lord the king." Well, now let's hear Mephibosheth's side of that story. Tom, 24 through 30.
Mephibosheth, grandson of Saul, also came down to welcome the king. He had not taken care of his feet or his beard, and had not washed his clothing from the day the king departed until the day he came back in safety. When he came from Jerusalem to meet the king said to him, "Why didn't you go with me, Mephibosheth?" Mephibosheth answered, "Your servant said, because I am crippled, I need to have the donkey saddled so that I can ride on it and go with the king. But my lord the king, my servant, deceived me. He has slandered your servant to my lord the king. However, my lord the king is like an angel of God. Do what is right in your eyes. All the house of my father deserved death from my lord the king, but you included your servant among those who eat at your table. What further right do I have to cry out again to the king?" The king said to him, "Why say more about your situation? I say that you and Ziba are to divide the land." Mephibosheth said to the king, "Let him take everything now that my lord the king has come safely to his house."
All right, so what's the true story there that Ziba didn't tell David?
There's no donkey for him to ride.
Yeah, what am I supposed to do, man? I'm
All the
crippled.
stuff on it, all
He
the-
took all the stuff.
all the
He took the donkeys. Of course I wanted to come with you, but he took everything. And then he said to David, "Yeah, Mephibosheth's going to stay because he thinks Absalom's going to restore, the family of Saul and this and that." And so Mephibosheth's kind of sitting there and you can just imagine how it says he hasn't cared for his feet. He hasn't trimmed his, he just looks, what's the word? Disheveled. Guy hasn't taken a shower in months. He hasn't trimmed himself in months. He probably fingernails, and he's just kind of crippled, just looking at David. So at the end of the day, how is Mephibosheth taken care of? He had told Ziba, "You get everything," and now he says, "Let's do half and half." Here too, almost like David, I don't want to get into this too much. Just you take half, he take half, and let's move on. And even there, Mephibosheth, "I'm just happy you're home. I'm just happy you're back. He can have it all. I'm just happy the king's here." That's kind of all we hear about them from here on out. But okay, a couple other we're going to get to number 3. We'll do it at the end though. A couple other characters. How about Barzillai? 31 through 39. Want to keep going, Tom? You're doing fine. Tell me about Barzillai. This is one of David's trusted friends.
Barzillai the Gileadite
Gileadite, there you go.
came down from Rogelim. He crossed over the Jordan, escorting the king back over the Jordan. Barzillai was very old, 80. That's not old.
The Holy Spirit. What do you mean old? Is that part inspired?
He had provided food for the king during his stay at Mahanaim because he was a very wealthy man. The king said to Barzillai, "Cross over with me. I will provide for you as my guest in Jerusalem." But Barzillai said to the king, How many years am I going to be alive? Why should I go up with the king to Jerusalem? Today I am 80 years old. Can I tell the difference between good and bad? Can your servant taste what I eat and what I drink? Can I still hear the voice of the male and female singers? Why should your servant become a further burden to my lord the king? Let your servant cross over the Jordan with the king for a short distance. Why will the king pay me back with such a reward? Please let your servant return and die in my own city near the grave of my father and my mother. But look, here is your servant Kimham. Let him cross over with my lord the king. Do for him whatever seems good to you. So the king said, Kimham shall go over with me, and I will do for him whatever seems good to you. All that you want from me, I will do for you. So all the people crossed over the Jordan, and the king also crossed over. Then he kissed Barzillai and blessed him. Barzillai then returned to his own home. The king went over to Gilgal, and Kimham crossed over with him. All the people of Judah, as well as half the people of Israel, escorted the king over. But suddenly all the men of Israel came and said to the king, why have our brothers, the men of Judah, stolen you and brought the king and his household over the Jordan, along with all the men of David? All the men of Judah responded to the men of Israel, it is because the king is closely related to us. Why has this angered you? Have we eaten at the king's expense? Or have we received anything for ourselves? The men of Israel responded to the men of Judah, 10 shares of the king belong to us. That is more of David than you have the right to. Why do you despise us? Were we not the first to speak about bringing our king back? But the response of the men of Judah was even harsher than the words of the men of Israel.
Okay, so you still see there's some tension going on there. First of all, this Barzillai. So what do we remember about him, and what is David's encouragement to him, and what is his answer to David? What did Barzillai do for David when he was on the run? Took him in, took care of him, wealthy guy. And now David says, all right, come to Jerusalem. And Barzillai's response to that? I can't hear, I can't see, my days of adventures are over. Let me just go die in peace back with my relatives. But what can you do for me?
No wonder he doesn't think 80 is old, he's wealthy.
Right. It's easy when you're a billionaire. Here's your servant Kimham. Some think maybe that was his son or relative. I'm done. I don't need to go to Jerusalem, but here, this guy's got his life in front of him, and take him and let him, as my family, if he is his son. Right, here's someone in my family who can take care of him instead. And David says, okay, so Kimham will cross over with me, and I'll do for him whatever pleases you. So a way to thank Barzillai for his kindness. So in all this, you think about people God puts, maybe the bigger lesson here if you were preaching on it, people God puts in your life at just the right time to give you what you need, whether it's physical things or mental things or a shoulder to cry on. Who are your Barzillais? Who are your people that God has given you that you say, thank you for giving me trusted people I can turn to, and people who have helped me throughout the years. So back to number 3. In about 60 years, the kingdoms of Israel and Judah would permanently divide. Back at the beginning of our section we read, and now here at the end, what indication do we have there really even now are still before the divided kingdom, 2 kingdoms in Israel? So at the beginning, in verses 8 through 15, what was going on there? David, look at verse 11 especially and on. David sent this message to Zadok and Abiathar. And what is David's problem with the people of Judah? You remember, that's his relatives. He's from Judah. David is a Judite. Why is he upset with the people of Judah? Skim verses 11 through 12.
They are taking their time
Right.
bringing the king back.
Yeah. How come Israel's first in line to bring me back, and you guys who are literally my flesh and blood. They're my cousins, but you guys are my brothers and sisters. You guys should be wanting me to be back on the throne like now. Why are they first? So now you go to the end, 41 and on. The men of Judah have taken him, and now what do the people of Israel say?
They accuse Judah of stealing the king.
Right? How come you get to be so close to the king? Don't you know we have 10 shares of him? And they say, well, we're his brothers. It's not like we've taken anything from him. It just makes sense. So now you have, and then at the end, it's just kind of like the one can't outdo the other in their arguing. And that's, I think, what that last verse. The men of Judah responded even more harshly than the men of Israel. Weren't we first, the Israelites say, to bring back the king? Well, yeah, but. Oh, yeah, but. And he's just griping and arguing and moaning at each other. And so you can say, again, remember, these are the 12 tribes of Israel, right? This is not how this is supposed to be. But you're starting to see crumbling from within. And even when David is in charge, you can see the writing on the wall that the divided kingdom is coming. So it shouldn't be too surprising when after Solomon dies and the whole Rehoboam, Jeroboam thing. And this has been coming for some time when the divided kingdom finally does happen. How about the last question there? The Lord chastens and then he sends relief. This happened in David's case. Can you point out a time when the Lord sent a difficulty into your life and then sent a blessing to take the place of those difficulties? You think of David on the run and everything he went through, and now here he is back home and everything, the blessings he's getting to receive. Yeah, anybody? What is that verse? I forget the second half of it. His anger lasts only a moment, but his mercy lasts a lifetime? Kind of the point of, the Lord disciplines and then he heals. The Lord chastens and then he brings comfort. We can all think of times, I'm sure, where God has allowed circumstances, and sometimes it was our fault. We got ourselves into the mess. Sometimes it's just living in a sinful world and you're part of it. But how God let you go through some things, let you go through the ringer a little bit. But then on the other side, he brought you out. And you can look back and say, I grew from that. Thank you, Lord. You did chasten, you did discipline. But it grew my faith. It brought me closer to you. It brought me closer to your son. And then you get to all those, what father doesn't discipline the son he loves? What father doesn't? If you go through life with no problems, what need have you for God? What need have you for a Savior?
Small children, and I don't know what age this flips, but small children, when you discipline them, they will run to you for a hug.
For a hug, sure.
And for reassurance that they're loved.
Yeah.
At some point that flips and then they just probably go away. But,
Yeah, you're the bad guy then, yeah, but right.
but the little ones run to you.
Some psychology there. They know you're the one, even though you disciplined, you're the one who can bring comfort. You're the one, they just want a hug. They just want you to say it's going to be okay. Yeah, it's a good example. All right, well, I'm good if you're good to move on from there. Chapter 20, well, here we have another rebellion. So we have another Benjamite. Remember, Saul was a Benjamite. A troublemaker named Sheba. Yeah, all those Shebas, man. I know all about Shebas. Different Sheba. 1 through 10. 1 through 10. Keep going, Tom. Did you?
A worthless troublemaker named Sheba, son of Bichri, a Benjaminite, was present. He blew the ram's horn and said, we have no share with David and no inheritance with the son of Jesse. Every man to his own tent, Israel. So all the men of Israel deserted David and followed Sheba, son of Bichri. But the men of Judah stuck with their king and accompanied him from the Jordan to Jerusalem. David arrived at his palace in Jerusalem. The king took the 10 concubines whom he had left to take care of the house and put them in a residence that was under guard. He provided for them, but did not go to them anymore. They were confined until the day of their death, a life of widowhood. The king said to Amasa, "You have 3 days to bring all the men of Judah to me and to be here yourself." So Amasa went to summon Judah, but he took longer than the time that David had set for him. So David said to Abishai, "Now Sheba, son of Bichri, will do more damage to us than Absalom. You take the soldiers of your Lord, pursue Sheba, so that he does not find fortified cities for himself, and we lose him." So Joab's men, the Kerethites, the Pelethites, and all the other Hittites, and all the elite troops followed Abishai. They went out from Jerusalem to pursue Sheba, son of Bichri. When they were by the large stone that is at Gibeon, Amasa came to meet them. Joab was wearing his battle dress and had a belt with a sheath dagger fastened around his waist. As he went forward, the dagger fell out. Joab said to Amasa, "How are you, my brother?" With his right hand, Joab grabbed Amasa's beard to kiss him. Amasa was not on guard against the dagger that was in Joab's other hand. Aha! With it, Joab struck you don't mind a little lad on, do you?
No, we don't.
With it, Joab struck Amasa in the abdomen, and Amasa's intestines spilled out on the ground. It did not take another blow to kill him. Joab and his brother Abishai resumed their pursuit of Sheba, son of Bichri.
Okay. Pause there. What claim did Sheba make to get the men of Israel to follow him instead of King David? Going back to what we just heard at the end of chapter 19. Who does David care about? Who does he not care about?
His brothers, Judah, cares about Judah.
Yeah, Judah, we don't have any share in him. All he cares about is Judah. Forget this guy. Each man to his tent. Let's go back to the way it was when Saul was in charge and Absalom kind of understood what was going on. And you know what? We're going to take care of this David problem once and for all. So again, you see that this divided kingdom should not be a surprise when it happens. This has been going on for a century before it finally came to fruition. This whole thing with the concubines. This gets down to number 4 there. Remember that story with the concubines when David had fled and he left the 10 concubines to take care of the palace, and then Absalom, there was the 2 guys, Ahithophel and Hushai, right? And one of them was David's guy that he kind of said, "I want you to give him bad advice instead of good advice." And Ahithophel had been David's guy, and now he had gone over to the side of Absalom. And Absalom says, "What should I do?" And Ahithophel says, "Well, here's one way you can really make us stink. Sleep with all your dad's concubines, and that'll show them all that you're the one in charge now." So he had done that, and it said they kind of went in one by one into the tent, and Absalom had therefore put a stench in the nostrils regarding David to all of Israel. So now here's these poor 10 ladies, these 10 concubines, and David returns, and what does he do? He provides for them, but he doesn't lie with them, and he basically keeps them under house arrest. They're kept in confinement till the day of their death, living as widows. A little bit, your heart kind of goes out to these women, right? They don't have a lot of say in anything. They're just going to do what they have to do. What did they do wrong in all this? So to number 4, the consequences of David's sin continue to plague him. Note these poor concubines who were kept secluded for life. The continued rebellion of Sheba. Consequences of our sins do the same. Think of maybe an alcoholic parent or an unfaithful spouse. Talk to me about the effects that sin can have on others that you maybe don't realize until it happens or after it happens.
What others?
Mm-hmm.
What others?
What do you mean by what others? So oftentimes, when someone sins, are they necessarily thinking about how it's going to affect other people?
Oh, no.
You're doing it because you want something, it'll feel good, it'll taste good, it'll whatever. But oftentimes, your sin has consequences not just for you, but for others around you. What are some examples of that?
Just children. You know, in school, we had a lot of kids with alcoholic parents or whatever their parents did, and not through any fault of their own, that rubs off on them. I mean, that's what they consider to be normalcy.
Right.
And so if they go to another kid's house or they're at home and there's a friend with them and they see the alcohol there, hey, you know, let's do this, and could make the other kid, either of them, extremely sick, or, you know, then parents don't realize, oh, I guess I made another kid really sick because I left this alcohol in here.
Sure.
They don't get it that the little kids they're growing up thinking that is what normal is.
Just normal. You get yelled at all the time at home. What is that? What happens to you if you get yelled at all the time? To many, well, that's how you deal with problems then, right? You start yelling. It's kind of that whole nature-nurture thing, right? How much sin, and this is a psychology thing too, but how much responsibility do parents share as their kids grow, depending on how they were raised, what they saw, how they were loved or not loved, how much of that rubs off then when they become the parent, when they become the one in charge. And it's just kind of natural to have tendency, well, this is what I know, because this is how I was raised. And if I wasn't hugged, I probably am not going to hug. If I was yelled at all the time, I'm probably going to deal with it by yelling. This is how we deal with conflict. And to that point, now we don't have to get too deep into that, but how much of it is just nature? How much of it is, well, this is what they know because this is from their life experiences. Anything else on that one? No. I think we get the point, right? Sin hurts people, not just you sometimes. Oftentimes, not just you. It hurts the people around you too, whether you realize it or not. How did Joab reclaim his leadership in David's army? We'll just see about that, David. Amasa's promotion didn't last long.
Joab assassinated.
It's kind of interesting. So yeah, David, first he goes to Amasa, right? Let's get the men of Judah, let's get to war here. And he takes a while. So then he goes to Abishai, who is another nephew, says, okay, well, you get the army together. And it's like all of a sudden Joab's there with the army, right? Joab kind of just takes matters into his own hands. And as they were out at the Great Rock Gibeon, Amasa came to meet them. And here's Joab wearing his military tunic, steps forward. And Joab has this in his mind all along, right? Well, if David's not going to take care of this problem, I will. Seems like he does that a lot, right? If David's not going to do it, I will. And assassinates him right in front of everyone there. So Joab and Abishai then are back in charge, and they pursue Sheba. Joab is going to, in First Kings, there's going to be consequences for all this eventually, in the early part of First Kings, but for now, it seems like it's kind of one of those where David realizes, I just better keep my hands off of Joab. I think for various reasons. Joab is there's a lot going on there in the whole Joab relationship, and maybe it's just best to re-promote him and kind of stay out of the Joab business for a while. And I remember saying like a month ago, as you follow David and Joab, it's just such an interesting relationship. There's just all these, yeah. Joab's an interesting character of the Bible. Never heard a sermon preached on him, but it'll be an interesting one to preach. I'll do it after I do my commentary on Exodus. It's absolutely ridiculous. I could see like 10 chapters, or do like the plagues or something, but I'm not sure how I'm supposed to write an isagogical paper on the entire book of Exodus. So I'm going to be a little busy these next 3 months, I guess, writing a commentary. You could tell I'm a little frustrated with that assignment.
Couldn't tell.
Yeah, if anyone's listening to this, I'll figure it out.
Fire in the cloud.
What's that? Yeah, right. Yeah.
Fire in the cloud.
Yeah, and then the later part is all the regulations on how to build the tabernacle and the priestly garments.
God was German.
I'll put that in there, see what they say.
Follow-
Clearly,
follow the
God was
rules.
German.
We have a plan.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's see the end of Sheba here. So now Joab's back in charge. Sheba's got his intestines spilled out all over the road. Must have been a pretty sharp knife. Huh?
Amasa.
Hmm?
Amasa. You said she.
Or, yeah, Amasa, sorry. Sheba's going to have his head cut off here pretty soon. Yeah, Amasa, it must have been just one of those. And just,
Well, Joab very clearly knows how to kill.
yeah, Joab, not his first kill in rodeo for sure. He knows his way around a knife and intestines. Take it 11 through the end of the chapter. Karen, Dean, Lynn? I saw one of you raise your hand there. Go ahead, Dean, you got it?
One of Joab's men stood beside Amasa and said, "Whoever favors Joab and whoever is for David, let him follow Joab." Amasa lay wallowing in his blood in the middle of the road, and the man saw that all the troops came to a halt there. When he realized that everyone who came up to Amasa stopped, he dragged him from the road into a field and threw a garment over him. After Amasa had been removed from the road, everyone went on with Joab to pursue Sheba, son of Bichri. Sheba passed through all the tribes of Israel to Abel Beth Makkah, and through the entire region of the Bichrites, who gathered together and followed him. All the troops with Joab came and besieged Sheba in Abel Beth Makkah. They built a siege ramp up to the city, and it stood against the outer fortifications. While they were battering the wall to bring it down, a wise woman called from the city, Listen, tell Joab to come here so I can speak to him." He went toward her, and she asked, "Are you Joab?" "I am," he answered. She said, "Listen to what your servant has to say." "I'm listening," he said. She continued, "Long ago, they used to say, 'Get your answer at Abel,' and that settled it. We are the peaceful and faithful in Israel. You are trying to destroy a city that is a mother in Israel. Why do you want to swallow up the Lord's inheritance?" "Far be it from me," Joab replied. "Far be it from me to swallow up or destroy. That is not the case. A man named Sheba, son of Bichri, from the hill country of Ephraim, has lifted up his hand against the king, against David. Hand over this one man, and I'll withdraw from the city." The woman said to Joab, "His head will be thrown to you from the wall." Give it to a woman to do and it'll get done. Then the woman went to all the people with her wise advice, and they cut off the head of Sheba, son of Bichri, and threw it to Joab. So he sounded the trumpet, and his men dispersed from the city, each returning to his home. And Joab went back to the king in Israel. In Jerusalem. Joab was over Israel's entire army. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, was over the Kerethites and Pelethites. Adoniram, was in charge of forced labor. Jehoshaphat, son of Elulud, was recorder. Sheba was secretary. Zadok and Abiathar were priests. And Ira the Jirite was David's priest.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know anything real. So chase Sheba all the way up to Abel Beth Maacah. And it seems like this Abel Beth Maacah is a place known throughout Israel as a place where wise people lived. You would go there to seek wisdom. We're not really told much else about it. I don't know what would be the equivalent of that today. I don't know. Some people think maybe like a university town. You know, that's where all the professors are. This is where you get wisdom. This is where really smart people live. So, yeah, interesting. This woman, right? This woman takes matters into her own hands. And so, Joab, what's the deal? Why do you want to destroy our city? This is a peaceful place. And Joab's answer? Well, it's kind of funny. Well, I don't kill and destroy. Sure, you know, far be it from me to destroy cities, but here's the deal: Sheba, this guy named Sheba, is the problem, and she said, "Oh, well, we'll take care of that." Like you said, the woman gets down from the wall, and pretty soon Sheba's head comes popping over the wall. And, oh, okay, blow the trumpet. We're done. Out of here. Let's go home. And that was
We
easy.
don't even know who this woman is.
No, just this
Oh,
random woman. Yeah, and you get that a lot in the Bible. And a woman came and. Yeah,
Okay then.
you'd think it'd be like a leader of the city,
Well,
yeah, someone who
She was.
makes you think of that Proverbs 31 woman that she sits out at the city gate and she, this perspective that all women in the Bible were like second-class citizens, and I think we see plenty of times in the Old Testament where, no, women had a pretty important role in a lot of major events in the history of God's people. Here's another example of that. I'll take care of it, Joab. Give me 2 seconds. Hold on. Anything else on the end of 20? Maybe another thing that's just kind of interesting, well, even though it doesn't come out and say it. So at the beginning of the story, Sheba gets the 10 tribes all riled up, right? All of Israel riled up. And you have them on one side, and then you have David and his men on the other. And I think this just again shows you how David's mighty men and David's military and the strength of David's warriors. We're not told the ratio of how many troops are on one side versus the other, but the fact that it's not long and Sheba and his men are on the run and they're hiding out in a city, and David and his men have chased them all the way up there. I think David had some pretty elite guys underneath him. More than once you hear about the soldiers that fought for David, and these weren't just bums off the street, right? These were Navy SEALs, these were Army Rangers, these guys knew their way around.
It was like the Roman legions. I mean, they were well fed.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were well trained too, but they also were well fed. And I don't know that, you know, what's it called, food, scarcity or whatever. Back then, I don't know that people were all that great a shape. I mean, maybe they were, but the army got some of the best stuff, so they were in good shape and good fit.
Army travels on its stomach.
Yeah, that's right. Who said that? Napoleon?
Well, I think we can get through 21. There's not going to be a lot of real deep stuff here, or at least the first half of 21. So there's going to be a famine, speaking of what you just said, Dean. 3 years of famine, and David's going to wonder, what is going on here that we have a famine? Remember back then, if you have a famine, that's a big deal. You not just turn on the artificial water, right? Your animals are dying, your crops aren't growing. This is going to be a big problem real fast. So 21, 1 through 14. Let's go.
During the reign of David, there was a famine for 3 successive years. So David sought the face of the Lord. The Lord said, "It is on account of Saul and his blood-stained house. It is because he put the Gibeonites to death." The king summoned the Gibeonites and spoke to them. Now the Gibeonites were not a part of Israel, but were survivors of the Amorites. The Israelites had sworn to spare them, but Saul, in his zeal for Israel and Judah, had tried to annihilate them. David asked the Gibeonites, "What shall I do for you? How shall I make amends so that you will bless the Lord's inheritance?" The Gibeonites answered him, "We have no right to demand silver or gold from Saul or his family, nor do we have the right to put anyone in Israel to death." "What do you want me to do for you?" David asked. They answered the king, "As for the man who destroyed us and plotted against us so that we have been decimated and have no place anywhere in Israel, let 7 of his male descendants be given to us to be killed and exposed before the Lord at Gibeah of Saul, the Lord's chosen one." So the king said, "I will give them to you." The king spared Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, because of the oath before the Lord between David and Jonathan, son of Saul. The king took Armani and Mephibosheth, the 2 sons of Alza's daughter Rizpah, whom she had borne to Saul, together with the 5 sons of Saul's daughter Merab, whom she had borne to Adriel, son of Barzillai, the Malachite. He handed them over to the Gibeonites, who killed and exposed them on a hill before the Lord. All 7 of them fell together. They were put to death during the first days of the harvest, just as the barley harvest was coming. Rizpah, daughter of Allah, took sackcloth and spread it out for herself on a rock. From the beginning of the harvest till the rain poured down from the heavens on the bodies, she did not let the birds of the air touch them by day, or the wild animals by night. When David was told that Allah's daughter Rizpah, Saul's concubine, had done, he went and took the bones of Saul and his son Jonathan from the citizens of Jabesh Gilead. They had taken them secretly from the public square at Bethshan, where the Philistines had hung them after they struck Saul down on Gilboa. David brought the bones of Saul and his son Jonathan from there, and the bones of those who had been killed and exposed were gathered up. They buried the bones of Saul and his son Jonathan in the tomb of Saul's father Kish at Zelah in Benjamin, and did everything the king commanded. After that, God answered prayer in behalf of the land.
All right. So to kind of understand what's going on here, you have to go all the way back to the book of Joshua, chapter 9. Now we won't read the whole thing, but just to, so remember Joshua, this is, the Exodus is now over. Joshua is going to be the one to lead them into the promised land. Jericho has just happened, where those walls come tumbling down. Ai has just happened. So they're just getting into the promised land. And you get to Joshua chapter 9. And I'll kind of just skip around here. When all the kings west of the Jordan heard about these things, that's everyone living in the promised land, they came together to make war against Joshua and Israel. However, when the people of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they resorted to a ruse. They went as a delegation whose donkeys were loaded with worn-out sacks and old wineskins. The men put worn and patched sandals on their feet, wore old clothes. Their bread was dry and moldy. They went to Joshua at Gilgal and said, "We've come from a distant country. Make a treaty with us." The men of Israel said to the Hivites, which is the same thing as the Gibeonites, "Perhaps you live near us. How can we make a treaty with you? We are your servants," they said to Joshua. "Who are you? Where'd you come from?" And then they talk about where they've come from. And at the end of the day, verse 15, Joshua made a treaty of peace with them to let them live. And the leaders of the assembly ratified it by oath. You keep going on. Go to verse 21, when Joshua realized they were kind of tricked. "Let them live, but let them be woodcutters and water carriers for the entire community." So the leader's promise to them was kept. Verse 26, Joshua saved them from the Israelites, did not kill them. He made the Gibeonites woodcutters and water carriers for the community and for the altar of the Lord at the place the Lord would choose. So when you read that for the first time, you're like, okay, kind of an interesting story. And then you kind of hear nothing about this whole group of people until 2 Samuel. And now it comes up where now there's a famine for 3 years, and David says, well, what's going on, Lord? Did we do something wrong? And he says, yep. What did we do wrong? And he says, remember the Gibeonites? No. How much would David have remembered about the Gibeonites? Not sure, but we do know that Saul said, forget Joshua and forget the oath that we made about the Gibeonites. We're wiping these people out. And apparently God didn't take too kindly to that. Which, what does that tell you about how seriously God takes oaths? How seriously God takes promises? The reason this famine is happening is because of what you broke your promise. You people broke your promise to these Gibeonites. So, now David is trying to fix it. And he goes to the Gibeonites. What can I do? What can we do? And what was their answer to David? Seven relatives of Saul. Yeah, we need to. That will avenge all of our people who've been killed. So Mephibosheth is off limits because he already had made it. He had promised Jonathan's son Mephibosheth, nothing's going to happen to you. But there are some other relatives here, and he finds 7 of them. Makes you wonder if these 7 were involved in some way with the killing of the Gibeonites, perhaps. Hands them over. They're put to death, and they're exposed, they're hung out for everyone to see. And then you get this kind of heart-wrenching story of this woman named Rizpah. A couple of the guys killed were her kids. And what does she do?
Eaten and attacked by the bird.
Can you imagine a mom? Here's your 2 sons out there slaughtered, and every day she's trying to keep the birds away from eating them. Every night she's trying to keep the wild animals away from tearing up their flesh. And that's become her lot in life, is to save her dead kids from their flesh being torn apart. And it's to the point where even David says, let's give these people a proper burial, right? And they get Saul's body and they get Jonathan's body, what's left of it, and bury them all in his dad's tomb. So, to that, number 6, the wheels of the Lord grind slowly, but they also grind very fine. How does this become apparent in this account, and has this ever become apparent in your life? I mean, from Joshua to David is a good 350 years. And now here you have this random famine 350 years later. That's before the Revolutionary War. How many people even remember the Gibeonites?
God remembers.
But God remembers.
And they said to lay him out on a hill before the Lord. So I don't know if they were converted, but at the very least, they learned who the Lord was.
Who the Lord was, yeah. Has God ever kept a promise to you, but it took 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years? Maybe even hasn't done it yet, but it's still 10 years away. Yeah. God remembers, right? If God says something's going to happen, it's going to happen.
So in other words, if you make a promise to God, you better do it now.
Well, yeah, it's that whole, Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Right? That whole thing with the second commandment, if you're going to bring the Lord's name into something, you better mean it. This isn't just a throwaway word. If you take an oath, mean it. Everything else comes from the evil one, Jesus said. So, kind of makes you shudder a little bit when, how many times do I swear to God, like, okay, be careful when you're swearing to God. Here's a prime example of that. Oh, anything else there? That's probably a good place to pause. Well, let's just read let's just read the last part. Then we're done with it. Not that I want to rush through it, but I'll just do it. There's a bunch of names. Once again, there was a battle between the Philistines and Israel. David went down with his men to fight against the Philistines. He became exhausted. Here's what I was talking about earlier. Ishbi-Benob, one of the descendants of Rapha, whose bronze spearhead weighed 300 shekels, like 7 pounds, who was armed with a new sword, said he would kill David. But Abishai, son of Zeruiah, came to David's rescue. He struck the Philistine down and killed him. And David's men swore to him, saying, "Never again will you go out with us to battle, so that the lamp of Israel will not be extinguished." In the course of time, there was another battle with the Philistines at Gob. At that time, Sibbecai, the Hushathite, killed Saph, one of the descendants of Rapha. In another battle with the Philistines at Gob, Elhanan, son of Jaar or Gaim, the Bethlehemite, killed Goliath the Gittite, who had a spear with a shaft like a weaver's rod. So apparently the old Goliath wasn't the only big guy. Apparently they grew. You think of some places in the world, you see some tribes in Africa and places, people just are tall, right? They're just big people. That's just in their DNA. And it seems like the Philistines had some of that too, that there was just some big old dudes who came out of Philistia. In another battle, which took place at Gath, there was a huge man with 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 in all. He was also descended from Rapha. When he taunted Israel, Jonathan, son of Shimeah, David's brother, killed him. These 4 were descendants of Rapha and Gath, and they fell at the hands of David and his men. So, not if there's anything real spiritually big there, but just here's more examples of God being on David's side and on Israel's side and protecting him from his enemies. Okay, well, good. We got through our stuff. Next time, we're going to finish 2 Samuel. I think. That's the goal.
And then what?
Well, are we sick of talking about the history of Israel?
Yeah. I have a
You're
request.
honest.
How about Exodus?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe if you do a Bible study, it will help you with your people.
Plenty to talk about there. What's your request?
There's several places in the Bible where God talks about our future. Our future. And I'd like to know if you know of some descriptions of that. Give you an example. One place it talks about when Jesus comes, we shall be like him and we shall see him as he is.
Mm-hmm.
There are other examples like that, where something is coming where we're going to be different.
Sure.
Can we
Just
find
in
some places?
your Exodus time.
So you're talking about kind of what is life after death look like? What is our physical?
Well, that's a possibility, that's one. There's several examples like that. I'd have to find him again.
Yeah. Sure. If everyone on board with that, do like a. I mean, that would all kind of go into a Judgment Day / what is heaven like? So it'd be all kind of part under that umbrella. What
Gives us something to look forward to.
what are we looking forward to?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's next after all this?
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm game for that. If you're good, I'm with you there. I think that'd be a good one. Are you okay with just kind of cutting it off? Do you want to like finish the story of David and then cut it off there? You know what I'm saying? Like he goes a couple chapters into 1 Kings. Do you want to like finish David off and then?
Yeah, let's finish David.
Okay.
Finish him off.
Then you get into Solomon and that's going to turn into another couple months.
That would make sense.
Why don't Solomon, we can maybe do a different day. Let's finish the story of David. So we'll do next week, 2 Samuel, the week after that, the first couple chapters of 1 Kings, and then get into that. That seems like a nice cutoff where we'll put David in the grave and get him to heaven, and then we'll move on to, now what does heaven look like and what happens after that? All right, good. Anything else this morning? Reminder, church Wednesday night. Whether or not, taco bar, taco meal.
Are we gonna just assume it's gonna happen?
Yeah, I think,
I mean, the snow, yeah.
you never know. Either way, I'm gonna be here for church. We'll be broadcasting either way. So.
Somebody's gotta eat,
and someone's gotta eat. So if you can make it in, great. If not, I'm sure we'll struggle through with whatever taco stuff we have.
Or even if some people wanna bring it the day ahead,
Or bring it the day before.
if they
I'm sure.
can, if they're able to, I mean. We might not have that many people to eat, who knows?
All right. All right, then we'll close with the blessing. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all. Amen.